Good afternoon, flyleafs and bookworms. Welcome to this Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly. It's nice to be back with you all here today. And as usual, before we jump into all of our show goodness, I want to first say, please like, subscribe, and zap the bell. We do something new to our bell every show. That was one of my resolutions for the year. I got tired of saying ring the bell. But if you would like to receive notifications of our upcoming shows, because we do 3 of them a week, and that telephone needs to be on mute. Give me just a second.
I actually need to mute mine too. Now that you mentioned
I know. I just heard it bling, and I thought, what? I don't normally keep it turned on. That's why I didn't have it turned off, because I forgot. But anyway, yes, we do 3 shows a week. We do obviously Author Reads here on Fridays, Handmade Help Shopping on Sundays, and Fae News on Wednesdays. And if you want to get notifications of those, zap the bell for the future. And then also I want to give a shout out to today's show sponsor, which is the Witch Life podcast. And if you are looking for a new listen about witchcraft, magic, and spooky pop culture, then make sure to check out That Witch Life podcast. Not that. That Witch Life is hosted by 3 lifelong best friends and practicing witches exploring living as a witch in today's world. And each episode features an interview with an expert from the witchcraft world. And recent guests have included Stormy Daniels, Helena Garcia. Wow, Stormy Daniels? Like the Stormy Daniels is a witch? Helena Garcia of the Great British Baking Show, and Gabriella Hertick. And so they are available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, their information is going there in the ticker, also in the low bar. You can find them before, during, and after the show. Check them out. So they are really a fun little trio there. So I think with that said, then onward we go into today's show, and welcome, if you will please, today's author, HP. Is it Holo? Okay, yep. Or Holo.
Holo.
Okay, well, welcome, HP, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. Thank you for being here, of course. Please, if you will, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from. Give a shout out to any of your peeps, publishers, whatever conventions that you like. I don't know, home cons.
Right.
And yeah, let's hear about it.
All right. Well, I am writing from the nice, sunny upstate South Carolina right now, which is really nice that it's sunny today, because yesterday we were supposed to have tornadoes. But yeah, I kind of love the inconsistent weather here. But anyway. But anyway, as far as me, I've always lived here. I've been a writer for what I would consider most of my life. I actually remember the moment that I figured out that I wanted to become a writer. And it was actually, I was in 4th grade, and I was working on a little creative writing assignment. I think we had to write our own version of a fairy tale or something. And so I was working on it, and working on it, and working on it. And I'm getting like 3 or 4 pages in, and suddenly I get scared, because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a good student. I need to turn this in on time, but I'm having too much fun writing it, but I don't want to stop. What do I do? And I ended up just staying up all night writing this. I think it ended up being a 10-page story, which is pretty impressive for a 4th grader. But from that point on, I just realized, you know what? Hey, this is actually kind of cool. But my first memory of writing was associated with abject terror, which I guess is kind of appropriate for writing sometimes. But after that, I lucked out with my teachers, and actually had a really, really supportive string of teachers all the way up through high school. Wow. Who really, really encouraged my writing. And one of them, actually, when she realized I was writing novel-length work, I think this was in 7th or 8th grade, we reached that point of the year where you kind of run out of stuff to do because of testing, and she taught a novel that I wrote, which is amazing. Especially now that I look back on that particular novel, I kind of cringed, because you can tell a 7th grader wrote it, but at that time it was really cool. But it had all these like awful like anime and Pokemon and video game influences on it, and it's kind of hilarious in retrospect, but I also just kind of want to hide it. but it was still cool that it happened. But
you're not supposed to break the cardinal rule, which is never go back and look at / read your old work.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes it's cool to do that to see how far you advanced. And I actually after the series that I'm currently working on is actually directly inspired by stuff that I wrote when I was a kid. And I can talk about more about that later after we talk about Wizard's Way stuff. But one thing that I really enjoyed about my old writing was how how enthusiastic it was and how unashamed of its content it was, because it blended all sorts of crazy weird things and didn't even care about what made sense together, and just tried to make it work. And sometimes it did work and sometimes it didn't, but it was still just really fun writing. And
going spaceships. I mean, hey.
Oh
yeah. That is kind of hilarious. I mean, what do you think is probably one of the craziest combinations of things or something that you've written about, like from the past, like that?
I had one of my characters was a direct result of too much coffee and my asking what it would be like if Mary Poppins was a bounty hunter. Like a space bounty hunter. And I think I ended up abandoning that book for various reasons, but I really want to go back to that at some point, because I mean, it's Mary Poppins as a bounty hunter.
I feel like Mary Poppins Bounty Hunter absolutely has to be a novel that is written. And especially if you consider that there is some, I don't know if it's a fan theory or if it's just sort of people that read, but there's some sort of overlap in the idea that Mary Poppins is actually a dark fairy because of the type of things that she accomplishes and does, and the way that she's like, but I'm so good and I'm here to nanny your children, but whoosh, sit up straight, you know.
I've heard the one that has her as a Time Lord, and another that has her as a witch from the Harry Potter universe. And all of those I think are valid, because you can if you look in the right places, you can see hints that those could overlap.
But it's such a perfect way to be a bounty hunter, right? You have to go hunt maybe you like supernatural bounty hunter, and she goes after these, crazy creatures or maybe the enemies of whatever, and that's how she's like, I have to find a household in this particular city, to go and stay with for a magical 2 months while secretly I'm bounty hunting some weird creature, and then has to cover everything up Mrs. Doubtfire style. Like,
yes, I need to write this book now. I need to just drop everything that I'm writing and go back to this.
It's brilliant, right?
Yeah, most of my ideas actually come from me just being a smart aleck. It seems like my best ideas just come when I'm just rattling off stupid things, thinking that they're entirely going to be stupid, and then it's like, that's actually kind of cool. I'm going to write that. In fact, in the Wizard's Way, a lot of people's favorite character actually ends up being a character that I completely threw in for smart aleck reasons. And at some point I can talk about that since I'm going to be reading from it. You are muted, I think. I wondered why the sound. Yes.
I turn the sound off when I type because I have a clickety-clackety keyboard, and those are the ones I like. But I type and it sounds like a machine gun. There is no silent typing for me. But I wanted to just welcome everybody. I wanted to also say to everybody as well, this is because we talked about it right before the show. You have a YouTube channel. So before we continue on with the book thing, you do have a YouTube channel, and I would like to encourage everybody to fly on over to your YouTube. I'm going to post the link for that here in the comments right now, and to go over there and give you some subscribes. Because I know you also are looking to get your magic 100 number so you can get your vanity custom URL.
Yes, right now my URL is just a bunch of crazy random numbers, and it's hard.
Yeah. So
but you can also look up, if you just want to type in the search bar for YouTube, you can also just type in Holo writing, and that will bring it up too.
I will put that in there. But Holo writing on YouTube. Okay.
Yep.
Because I did not put that in your ticker since I knew it was like the crazy long thing.
Yeah.
The magic 100. So go over there and give some subscribe, you guys. Make it awesome, make it grow. And so, okay, so let's hear a little bit about today's book. What is it, and what's its genre? What's the premise of what we're going to be?
All right.
Hearing?
Well, today's book is The Wizard's Way. It's a young adult steampunk adventure comedy, and basically the main character is a young inventor and also a wizard in a city where inventors are suddenly being murdered and people don't like wizards to begin with. So he's got lots of sources of stress. Another of his problems is that as a part of his being a wizard, pretty much anytime he is stressed and touches metal, this giant mechanical lion creature pops out and causes destruction. So he's got this thing in him anyway, and he's suddenly under a lot of stress because, you know, people are trying to kill him for being a wizard and kill him for being an inventor. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, how do I keep this monster in? Well, anyway, at one point, his employer, who's also an inventor, is murdered, and he's finally like, okay, screw this, we got to get to the bottom of this. And so he starts investigating the murders with his employer's sword-fighting pug butler. And
Fighting pug butler.
oh yes, chaos and mayhem and whatnot ensues. And it's a fun little steampunk adventure.
Fancy pugs, though, seem like that those two things do go together, right? I could just see a little pug with a monocle or something.
Right. You know, the pug is the character I mentioned that I completely threw in randomly. There was a point early in the novel's writing where I was just having trouble getting a scene to go forward. And what I do whenever I hit a block like that is just take some random detail and throw it in and play with it and see what happens. Well, I threw in a sword fighting pug.
A sword fighting pug.
He ended up sort of taken over the novel, and he's everyone's favorite character now because it's a sword fighting pug. I mean, how can you not love him? But yeah, he ended up being one of the best smart aleck ideas I ever had. I love him to death.
Well, it's funny too sometimes because it's often the sort of sidekick characters that do become the most popular in not just in novels, but also, of course, in television shows, you know, where everybody's like, well, I mean, that's great. We get that that's the main character. But really, this person that's their sidekick is way more interesting. Or it's like, what is that person's backstory? Or, you know, so I feel like there's a lot of shows that we are like that here around the house.
Oh, yeah. There's another character in this novel, too. Her name is Adel Quimby, and when you meet her, she's sort of this really quiet, reserved patron of the main character's shop. And she grows interestingly, but a lot of people come back to me and say that she's their favorite character or one of their favorite characters. And I'm like, she's cool, but is she really that cool? And so it came as a surprise to even me because, like, I know how she develops past the book, and she's one of my favorite characters too, but the readers don't know what I know. And so it's kind of flattering at the same point that I happen to make this character that interesting. It surprises me a lot of times what readers like and what readers are indifferent to.
So do you ever write, like with that in mind, do you ever write things that are sort of outtakes or extended universe on your characters, or maybe little shorts, or, you know?
Well, I do have to say, I use a different writing style now than I did when I first wrote The Wizard's Way. And this is sort of a weird thing about my writing. I am working on a sequel to The Wizard's Way, which at this point I first published it in 2016, so it's several years old. And I used to be the sort of writer who would, like, I'm a pantser. I would go through and just write everything as it came to my mind and not really outline and whatnot. And one of the reasons why The Wizard's Way initially took so long to write, it's the product of 10 years of work. And the reason why The Wizard Circus was so long coming was because I created a really complex world in The Wizard's Way, probably more complex than I should have for my first novel, and ended up writing myself into world building holes. And so The Wizard Circus right now is almost done, but I'm having to go through and cut and nip and tuck and stuff and to make sure that the world makes sense. So I used to go through and like just basically go off on tangents to try to solve writer's block. But since I reached a point in The Wizard Circus where I was just like, you know what? I got to put this book down and step away. And when I come back in X number of months or so, I'll have enough distance to see the problems. And I ended up just experimenting with a new writing style entirely, where I started a whole new series. And with this particular series, I outlined, and I also limited the kind of storytelling I could do. And I also banned myself from using tangents and random insertions to solve problems. And the result is that I've written 3 books in 1 year, which I'm going, which I'm going to release in quick succession later this year. So so I can't remember I can't even remember what the question was, actually. I know I was going somewhere with it. This is how my brain is sometimes. It takes effort to get my brain organized. But
but it's funny because it's funny to hear you talk about this a little, because I was looking while you were talking a little bit earlier. I was looking at your wall behind you there, and how perfectly organized all of those pictures are. And I thought, does this so clearly it's some kind of it's some kind of a penchant to make sure all of the things align, they're nice and neat. And I thought, I wonder if this is reflective in your writing style and how you create things, right? Because some people are, pants writers, and some people kind of do the whole cloud storyboard of putting things together, and then some people organize their whole world from beginning to end and do all of the stuff or at least they know it, right? They don't sort of just see where it goes, right? And I was like, it's so organized back there behind you. I wonder
it's a facade. Let me show you the rest of my office if I can. Yeah, this is what my office looks like. And
your heart, you think that's a oh, that's nothing.
You can't see the full majesty of it. Like, let me move my camera completely. Like, this is paper from years of work, and it's slightly more organized than it was. But I'm not an organized person at all. And the crazy thing about it, and this is somewhat, let me get my camera reorganized or repositioned now. The crazy thing about it is that I actually learned this past year, as a result of some anxiety issues and whatnot, that I have OCD, which is absurd, because I check a lot of there's apparently like 5 different types of OCD. And the one that I do not have is the organization obsessed one. but it's the sort of thing that the OCD was one of the reasons why the Wizards books took so long to write, was because my brain would get really obsessed with certain tangent ideas and be really determined to make them work, despite the fact that in the context of the world, they would not work. And so
details, it sounds like, too, because you said a number of times, you go back and then you wrap all of these things up, or you flesh them out, and you go back and find all the little places in order to make the world work. And that, to me, that this speaks a mind that is particular about the details,
Like, I'm a complete nerd for world building. I love really, really elaborately set up worlds. And my challenge is that it's sometimes hard to fit a plot in that world, because there's so much detail I want to include. And I say this is my book, but if you look on the front, you'll notice my husband's name is also on it. We co-wrote it, but in a capacity where I did all the world building and he helped me with plotting. My husband is an engineer, and he says that he doesn't write books so much as design them, and that's very much true. Like, when he writes, he has an outline. He finishes his outline, solves all his story problems in the outline phase, and then when he writes the novel, he basically just takes the outline and puts it in prose form. And I'm not that organized. I have to write my outlines in such a way that I have or at least in my new/current writing style, I have the character's goal, and each chapter has a specific thing they have to do to reach that goal. But I allow myself some wiggle room so that I can add world building details as I please, but the world building now has to serve the plot. The plot can't come as a secondary thought to the world building.
I think that is more like the way I would approach it, is that it's kind of goal oriented as opposed to every single, outline the thing, all the problems, all the, that is perhaps also too a little too stringent for me.
Yeah, with the new series that I'm writing, Jacob's technique is way too stringent for me too. Like I can't be that organized. But my new series, which I don't have a release date yet, I'm still waiting on cover art and whatnot before I set all the release dates and whatnot. But my new series is called Monsterpunk Horizon, and it's essentially a love letter to all the monster hunting shows that I loved as a kid, and all the monster hunting games that I play now. Because my husband, like I grew up with the first generation of Pokemon, and though I was more of a Digimon kid, but I collected everything from every monster show. Like I have Monster Rancher toys sitting on my bookshelf right now. I don't even know if anyone remembers Monster Rancher.
I don't know what Monster Rancher is, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
and
it was.
That you just have toys, I so approve of, right?
Oh yeah. But my husband and I also, like, our thing to do is to play Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise whenever it comes out later this month. And that's just our thing to do. And it occurred to me at one point that I really love monster hunting franchises. And so Monsterpunk Horizon is kind of this loving blend of all of these worlds, not fan fiction because it has its own distinct thing, but definitely spiritually inspired by them. And each story in Monsterpunk Horizon is a very simple, oh my gosh, there's a monster, we gotta kill it kind of thing. And they're very simple plots, but the simplicity of the plot allows me to play around with world and characters, and that's really where I excel as a writer, in my opinion, is just creating those crazy worlds and fun characters, because I love writing character dialogue. And I find it a great way to communicate information to the reader.
Yes.
So Monsterpunk Horizon is going to read very differently from The Wizard's Way, but I think it's still going to be a very fun series.
And dialogue moves things along as well, so it keeps the pacing going quite nice. So a little bit about today's story, and then I will turn the screen over to you for our actual reading. And while you are reading, I will be in the comment section with our viewers taking questions, so that when you're done, we can give you the Inquisition.
All right. Hey. Well, I'm actually going to be reading from the very beginning of the novel, so you're not going to miss much. But in this chapter, you're introduced to the main character, Chaucy, and a few of his problems, and one of my most favorite characters in all of the novel, Vanderlyn, who is a bear security guard. And there's in this world, there's an entire race of talking bears alongside an entire race of talking dogs, and both of those were randomly inserted, and also ended up being huge parts of the novel. Like I love the bears. I love the talking bears, and they actually end up playing a huge role in the Wizard Circus too. I ended up creating like elaborate histories and whatnot for them, more so than I even expected. Like it's amazing.
And that's a follow-up to this book, right?
Yes, the Wizard Circus is going to be the sequel whenever I finally finish it. My goal is to get to a good stopping point with Monsterpunk Horizon, get those first few books out, and then finally delve back into the Wizard Circus to get that thing out there, because people have been asking me for it for 5 years, and I need to get it out there. All right.
So I'm going to go on mute and turn all the things over to you. And folks, just as a reminder, if you want to put your questions, put them into the comments, and I will ask them at the end of HP's reading. And then also after that, we will have our drawing for the book for today. Yes. So hang around, and I'll be back with you in a little bit.
All right. Let's see here. Let me find my page. And come on, it shouldn't be that hard to find the front of a book. All right. This is The Wizard's Way by HP and Jacob Holo, Chapter 1, titled J. Chaucy Thatcher. Let me see if I can. Okay, the book is going to be right here so you can actually see it. All right. No, actually, that's in front of the microphone. So we're just going to do this and just imagine the book cover as I read. All right. There was a man hanging by his neck, and it had nothing to do with the festival. He dangled from an iron wand in the center of the city park, a black sack covering his head, painted with haunting white eyes and a jagged grin. From his neck, in equally jagged script, hung a sign reading, Wizard. Chaucy could see it plainly from his workshop roof. He saw people in the park pass by, look up, but then continue on with their morning constitutionals. They were in no hurry to take it down. He'd brought an apple and some cheese up for breakfast with a view, but not that view, and certainly not this week. J. Chauncey Thatcher would turn 18 in 7 days. The thought rose upon him like the sun on an execution morning. It was not hyperbole. It was fear, deep, cold-bellied fear that in 1 week he'd receive a letter from the Queen that was tantamount to this wizard's fate. Something clawed inside him. It was why, as he bolted out of his workshop, his singular thought was this: what the hell? I'm gonna fight a bear and then I'm gonna jump. Evolution had first intended the bear's claws to swat holes in its prey, but at the moment they were occupied by the pages of a book. Behind the bearman loomed a great iron gate wrought into leafy curls and barky branches in imitation of the surrounding greenery. The way he positioned himself before the gate, feet planted wide, chest puffed and bold, shoulders back, suggested that he was meant to be guarding it. However, the measured relish with which he absorbed the pages suggested that he sensed few threats against which to guard. That is, until his nostrils twitched, and the scent that carried through them drew him to quick attention. As a bearman, he prided himself on the acuteness of his sense of smell. He could pick a wily Grimhawk dame from a flock of corseted Iron City ladies miles below in Arling Park simply by the scent of sea salt and citrus in her hair. He could identify and trail a cut purse on the distinct tang of his fright alone. In fact, he could distinguish the nervous fear of a burglar from the exhilarated fear of a schoolboy about to swipe a candy on a dare. All humans carried particular scents to which their own noses were oblivious. He tested the air again, the crisp evergreen, open-mounted air, distant coal-fueled choke of industry, and ooh, candied nuts, the festival dealers had opened. But mingled with these scents of the Iron City, he detected one very particular smell. Aged wood absorbed from a 6-orth building, no doubt. Mechanical grease, the cool nip of iron, sweat, a musky cologne applied to cover the scent of sweat, the earthy mineral smell of underground, and not a single nip of fear. He'd encountered this scent before. Of course, his nose being incredibly acute, he could not yet see the person to whom it belonged, so he returned to his book. 15 minutes later, he tried to look surprised when 2 human feet stomped up to his own. "I demand entrance to the Crystal Heights," the feet said. The bear clapped his book shut as if startled from a trance, then peered down over his half-moon spectacles. Before him stood a boy as thin as kindling, face firm in a scowl that was clearly unaware of his own size, or the bear's, or the relation between the two, or simply didn't care. The boy locked his dark eyebrows in a practiced glare and planted one foot on top of the wooden box he'd wheeled along with him. This gave him the look of having conquered something, but his physique interfered with his intentions, for he had very much yet to grow into himself. His bare forearms crossed his chest like 2 toothpicks over a half-eaten sandwich. A very impudent sandwich, and one that was plainly searching for trouble. The bear guard put on his widest, toothiest grin. "James Chauncey Thatcher," he exclaimed. "Why, it's been months. You know, it's been so quiet since you were put away that I've almost caught up with the tales of Ambrist." He gestured toward his book. "I've no time to banter with you today, Vanderlyn," the boy stated. "I must enter the Heights as soon as possible. It's urgent." "Did you say banter?" Vanderlyn said. "You're using smart words today. You must be up to some mischief." "What?" the boy snapped. "The only time you ever put your vocabulary to use is when you're trying to pick fights with people. Otherwise, you just say, 'I don't have time to talk, Vanderlyn. I'm late for tea.'" Usually, Vanderlyn's voice came in a deep alveolar grumble, not because he was actually grumbling, but because that was how bear mouths handled words invented for human mouths. When he attempted Chauncey's voice, it became a high, reedy thing, like it might have come from a talking squirrel. "I do not sound like that," Chauncey objected. Which was true, Vanderlyn admitted. The boy's unruly puff of hair and burgeoning sideburns gave him the look of a small lion that hadn't grown into his mane yet. That was what he sounded like, a mewling cub that hadn't aged into his roar. "And I am never late for tea," Chauncey clipped. "However, I do have urgent business to attend to that needs to be handled soon." Vanderlyn crossed his arms over his chest. "When a scruffy thing like you says he's up to urgent business, I'm inclined to think he's up to no good. Especially when he's got an odd-looking box with him, and especially when his wrists are still raw from the Queen's shackles." The boy shrank at that. He twitched to hide his reddened wrists, but decided against it, and instead he planted his arms firmly akimbo where the wrists were clear. Really, boy, it surprises me that Inspector Ashton hasn't made you your own custom pair by this point. You're such a regular in the tunnels. My record has nothing to do with today's task, Chaucy groused. And how can you call me scruffy? You're a bear. A bear who knows how to dress properly for the high districts, Vanderlyn countered, gesturing along his attire with a dainty flourish. You will observe my finely tailored Wathston-Fandy waistcoat, neatly pressed dress shirt, and staunchly starched collar, complete with a silk cravat with a lovely floral design to match my gait. I thought of that last touch myself, by the way. You, on the other hand, look like you were just belched out of the cauldron and smell like a pile of wet dogman's underwear. In fact, take a mint, boy. Vanderlyn reached into his waistcoat pocket. I'm not sure what you're on about with that smell of yours, but it could stand to be a bit more pleasant. It's not that bad, Chaucy countered. Burgle, not to a human, Vanderlyn replied, as he opened a paw-sized tin. To a bearman, your scent is a distraction. Here. With 2 claws, he plucked a white mint from the tin and placed it in Chaucy's begrudging palm, which fell under the weight. For a bear mouth, the mint was perfectly sized. For a human, it was the size of a large biscuit. This won't even fit in my mouth, Chaucy stated. Then at least rub it on your clothes or in your armpits or somewhere, Vanderlyn responded. Anyway, it's all further reason not to admit you into the heights. You've made so many bad fashion choices today that I'm not sure I can trust you to choose wisely on any more complex decisions you might have to make. I wore a cravat, Chaucy defended, puffing out his neckcloth. A cravat alone does not a gentleman make, Vanderlyn argued, especially when he doesn't even have the decency to wear a clean suit with it. You're not even wearing a jacket, boy. You may as well be naked by human standards. That's even more reason not to let you into the heights unpermitted. Unpermitted? Chaucy puffed up his chest. My employer should have secured permission through Arthur Maberly. I've received nothing from Lord Maberly today, or Charles Farwood for that matter. Check your envelopes. I already checked them this morning. Then check again. Farwood should have sent a message. Charles Farwood should do lots of things that he doesn't, Vanderlyn grumped. But then he rolled his eyes and brought a stack of envelopes from a pocket. He made a show of examining each letter, taking it gingerly between 2 long claws, drawing it to his spectacles for closer examination, then raising it into a nearby sunbeam for further scrutiny, as if it held a message only discernible by sunlight. Eat your mint, boy. That's a Bernia mint, he said, as he reviewed each letter. Chaucy broke off a chip, as commanded, and kept his eyes on Vanderlyn. There wouldn't be a Farwood letter. There was supposed to be a Farwood letter. There were always supposed to be Farwood letters, but if Farwood could be relied on for anything, it was to make life difficult for his apprentice. This was why Chaucy and Vanderlyn knew each other so well that Vanderlyn would give him expensive Bernia mints, and why Chaucy knew that, despite their familiarity, Vanderlyn would soon tire of the distraction he provided. It was why he knew several alternate routes into the heights, all of them impossible today. This, in turn, was why he recognized that the gate he wanted to pass was only a bit taller than the bear blocking it, why he knew the bear's shoulder would make an excellent step if he could reach it, and why he brought this particular box in the first place. It was not the cleverest of his plans, but it was quick, or would be if he timed everything correctly, and, he now noted, very possible if he could just get Vanderlyn to back up another foot. Chaucy popped the mint chip into his mouth. None, Vanderlyn confirmed, returning the letters to his pocket. Chaucy slumped into a sigh as if he'd heard the most depressing news of his life. Could I bribe you then? He reached into his trouser pockets and inched the box forward. Bribe? Laughed Vanderlyn. That's uncharacteristic of you. Inch. I could bring you a fish from Arling Park Lake, Chaucy offered. Inch. Ah, do they stock salmon lightly dusted with dill and lemon now? Inch, inch. No, they stock fish, the wet kind, still wriggling. Inch, inch, inch. Vanderlyn's eyes widened as if scandalized. Surely you don't mean to imply that I'm heathen enough to eat my fish live? The box tapped against his clawed toe, and instinctively the bearman stepped back. I've seen the other bearmen do it, Chaucy said as he hopped onto his box. Yes, with the assistance of Vanderlyn's forearms, he could make the leap from here. Yes, but they're not as civilized as I... Vanderlyn didn't finish. Chaucy pulled one hand from his pocket and bashed it straight into the bearman's nose. He launched from the box, leapt to the bear's shoulders, and cleared the gate. Almost. As he passed Vanderlyn's head, a great, fleshy paw whomped into his face and thwapped him down to the boards with a sickening crack. The impact rang like a thunderclap in his head. Dark spots flickered across his vision, and a pervasive screeching whine rose in his ears. Still, through the addled ringing, he could hear the bearman bellow, "What is this devilish concoction?" It would have struck his heart had he not been looking for that reaction in the first place. Vanderlyn's arms flailed like furious windmill blades. His face squinched to such a pointed grimace around his nose that his gums were visible in an unintentional but no less comical snarl. This all centered upon a shiny, purplish splat that soaked his snout and part of his waistcoat. He sneezed. A bubble blooped out of his nostrils. It was hard to be afraid of a sight like that, even in bear-struck Adelment. It's emulsified soap and olive oil, Chaucy slurred. He tried to stand, but his legs were as wobbly as his tongue, and he collapsed face first onto the board. "Don't talk science to me, boy. I am not in the mood for it," Vanderlyn roared. Chaucy propped himself up on his elbows and shook his head. "Forward's valet uses it to soften clothes. This substance is absolutely monstrous, barbaric, diabolical. It's fabric softener," Chaucy groaned. He shook his head again. Slight dizziness swam through his senses, but his vision had cleared, and his ears had returned to normal. Good. He tried to stand again, this time successfully. Better. He crept forward, dragging the box behind him. "It is a chemical weapon," Vanderlyn persisted. "Ugh, this smell!" "It's not that bad, it's just flowery," Chaucy said, hoping Vanderlyn wouldn't notice that his voice now came from a different place. He crouched by the gate lock and reached into his waistcoat. "You are not a bear," Vanderlyn continued. "Your nose is 2,000 times inferior to mine. It is not just flowery. It is a lavender-scented weapon of unparalleled caliber." "You're not even dying," Chaucy pointed out. Vanderlyn froze. "What are you doing, boy?" he growled, squinting to the place where Chaucy had been lying. From his pocket, Chaucy pulled a thin rectangular case, and from that he slid out a lockpick. "Recovering," he said, clenching the pick in his teeth. "Checking for broken bones, same as I usually do when we meet." Next, he slipped a little L-shaped tool from the case. Vanderlyn's ears twitched, listening. "No, you're not. You've moved." Chaucy didn't bother answering. He knew it wasn't a trick that could last long, and Vanderlyn's paws were already inching around the gatewalk, orienting him where his eyes and nose could not. He wasn't even growling now. His ears flitted about in all directions, attentive. Chaucy had to move fast. He hooked the short end of the tension wrench into the bottom of the lock and slipped the lockpick in over it. Gingerly, he clicked along the tumblers on the inside, seeking the pattern that would finagle the lock into compliance. Click, 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 click. His pick ran along the lock's tumblers. Click. He found it. He twisted the tension wrench. The lockpick snapped. Vanderlyn's ears sprung erect. A fierce huff of recognition sprayed from his snout. He whipped to face Chaucy's direction, a growl bubbling up in his throat, eyes burning red with fury and lavender-scented soap. He stomped forward. Chaucy yanked another lockpick from his case and jammed it into the gate lock. Click, 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 click. Vanderlyn's steps tromped heavy on the woodwork, slow, cautious, but bone-jarringly powerful. 3 more steps, and the bear would be on top of him. Click, 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 stomp. Click, click. He turned the tension wrench. It gave, but not totally. Click, click, stomp, turn, clank. Chaucy flung the gate open, grabbed his box, and bolted. It was not long before a loud clang rang out behind him, followed by a satisfying clink and a fierce animal roar. "James Chaucy Thatcher!" Vanderlyn snarled. Chaucy had no reason to fear that snarl now. By the clang, clink, and roar that had followed him, he guessed that Vanderlyn had smashed into the gate, closing and locking it with his girth, and though the bear had a key, he was still blind and impaired by the overwhelming scent of the fabric softener. He could chase Chaucy in that condition, but it wasn't advisable, for there was a reason why the heights were called the heights. The boards beneath his feet creaked and swayed at the whim of the mountain wind, and the wooden mansions that spread out and up from this road did so with careful, plotted eccentricity. Some were shaped like predictable polygons, as their foundations allowed, but others spiraled like whimsical labyrinths up and over several sets of foundations, as the mountain demanded, and all looked to have trees sprouting out of their rooftops, because they did. Beneath the walk spread a great forest of massive oaks that had been alive since the beginning of the queendom, claimed by an ambitious set of Fourth Orus architects, and then rendered comfortably habitable through an intricate system of bolts, flexible joints, and sliding beams braced to secure the mansions in relative place. Several hundred wooden houses lingered in the canopy of the mountain's forest, protected by the 100-foot drop that waited beneath them. No one in the Crystal Heights ran without knowing the edges, which was why Chaucy ran with brilliant confidence in his stride, and why his bones froze when he felt the walkway judder to the distinct thudding rhythm of an ursine gallop. Vanderlyn was giving chase. Chaucy didn't bother looking back. He gathered every bit of spirit he had left into his legs and ran as best as his box would allow. Vanderlyn barreled up behind, streamlined now on all fours. Chaucy strained his muscles and sprinted forward even faster. Ahead, the walkway split, branching into ramps both upward and downward, and from there it wove an ant's maze of artificial paths through the ancient trees. Chaucy dashed up. The slant of the run would be hard on his legs, but he needed to be high to make this worthwhile. The higher the better, where the view was clear and the fall was brutal. Otherwise, this would all be for naught. At the top of the slant, the forest canopy opened. Brilliant sunlight streamed onto the wooden walkway, and Chaucy's hand shot up to dull the shock of sun blindness. It was inconvenient, but Vanderlyn would suffer it too, worse with his irritated eyes, which might afford him some more time. He pressed forward, heart pounding, muscles burning. Other branching paths presented themselves, and he took them, the nearing chuff of Vanderlyn's breath drawing ever closer in his pounding ears. A few more ramps, just a few more ramps, and then he'd be high enough on the overlook of Lord Arthur Maberly. Then he would jump and be free of Vanderlyn's teeth. He ran harder, forcing his legs up the next incline, and was met with a stairway. Damn it, a stairway! He could clear the stairs under less dire circumstances, but he couldn't be slowed today. If he opted to thump the box up, Vanderlyn would be at the stairs before he could even reach the top. He stared at the city below. The view was clear. Some tents and wheeled vendors sprawled from the base of the mountain, but he could handle those when they were relevant. This was the best spot circumstances would allow, and now was as good a time as any. He flung the box to the ground and tore at its lid, just as a bear-shaped shadow rose over him and a claw thrashed him to the ground. His face smacked hard into the wood. He rolled over and tried to scramble to his feet, blood spurting from his nostrils, but found himself pinned by one massive padded foot before he could even sit up. Chaucy clawed at the foot and shouted, "Get off me!" He meant it to be a snarl, but it squeaked out more broken and vulnerable than he'd intended. Perhaps hearing the strain of organs being crushed in the tone, Vanderlyn eased his foot off. Chaucy turned to his side, groaning as a fresh stream of blood spilled from his nose onto the planks. "Stop bleeding on everything, boy. Blood isn't fashionable in these parts." Chaucy tried to reply with an indifferent grunt, but in his condition it came out as a weak whimper. "And stop your moaning," Vanderlyn snapped. "You're a Calderling. You've survived worse than a mere slap. I must say, you've been uncharacteristically dumb today. Did you really think those shenanigans would work?" Excuse me. "Yes," Chaucy retorted. "I don't do things unless I think they'll work." He propped himself up on one elbow and touched the back of his hand to his bleeding nose. "Besides, I was out of quicker ideas." "Ow! Figs, I think you broke my nose. I'm a bear. Did you expect a love tap? Here, let's see that." He crouched down to Chaucy's prone form and tweaked his nose between two delicate claws. "No, it's still in place," he declared, then extended a paw. Chaucy took it, expecting to be pulled to his feet, but instead found himself flung across the bearman's shoulder like a sack of potatoes. "Oof, Vanderlyn, what are you doing?" "I don't trust you to walk yourself," Vanderlyn replied, taking the box handle in his other paw. "There's too much trouble you could get up to, walking." "Put me down, I'll look stupid to anyone who sees." "Well, you should have thought of that before you ruined my favorite waistcoat," Vanderlyn replied, beginning to canter down the walkway. "You should be grateful, you know. For most men who rush me, looking stupid is the least of their worries. I go easy on you because you at least cause interesting trouble, and you've helped me find ways to better secure the heights." "Glad to be of service," Chaucy clipped, and then twisted as best he could to face the bear's ear. "Vanderlyn, you have to let me go today. It's important. Listen, I'll buy you all the fancy Bernia mints your heart desires. I'll even throw in a keg of Broonhead." "Mince and mead, is it? How could I ever turn down an offer like that?" A happy rise in the pitch of his voice gave Chaucy hope, but that dissolved when Vanderlyn continued. "I will say I was disappointed in you today. Using your own stink to mask the lavender stench was clever, granted, but I'd expected a fancy machine to come into play. Something more intricate than a lockpick, anyway. Maybe a modified track hook for the trees or some equivalent. What's the matter with you today? What's the reason for all these hijinks?" "Cumulus congestus clouds," Chaucy said. "You're talking science again," Vanderlyn stated. "Towering cumulus," Chaucy clarified. He pointed toward a patch of sky that had earlier been blue, but was now punctuated by dark poofs that looked like foam billowing from the top of a freshly poured beer. They mean a storm is on its way, and bad weather will interfere with a thing I need to do today. What kind of thing? It's a surprise, Chaucy said lamely. It wouldn't be like the surprise you gave that Farrington Prince's balloon last fall, would it? No, that was unintentional. It was still on fire, and it landed you 6 months of trap, and it still landed you 6 months of trap-finding labor, didn't it? That's why you have to let me go, Chaucy insisted. My birthday's this week. The Queen's going to send her agents to see if I've satisfied the grace, and if I don't do something impressive, really impressive, to overshadow the mess with the prince, they're going to send me back to the cauldron. Boy, they're not going to send you back for that debacle. It's the combination of that and all the other things you've done that's the problem. Look at the facts. You've been out of the cauldron for 10 years and have spent 1 month for each of them sentenced to trap finding. I never committed any actual crimes, Chaucy objected, just badly timed accidents. That's what this next feat of yours is going to be too, a badly timed accident, whatever it is. No, it won't, Chaucy insisted. I planned it down to the finest detail, and the conditions right now are perfect, and... I'm trying to keep you out of trouble, boy, Vanderlyn barked. You're the first grace taker in years to even make it to 18, and all your disasters have at least happened in the pursuit of noble ambitions. I'm sure the Queen will take that into account, too. This said, the Quincentennial Festival seems to be starting up. I lost my place. Oh, go buy yourself some candied nuts and try to impress ladies at carnival games. Keep yourself inconspicuous and worry about the grace later. I risk too much by doing nothing. Right now, everyone thinks I'm just a polished ruffian with a lot of dangerous inventions. Vanderlyn snorted. Well, you are. I look it, Chaucy objected. When they look at me, they don't see that I've single-handedly run Farwood's shop, that I can read now, that I haven't stabbed anyone in 10 years. They just remember that I did stab someone and that I'm from the cauldron. Let's be fair, Chaucy. You ravaged a whole gang, in self-defense, and set their base on fire, accidentally, when you were 7. People who aren't from the cauldron wouldn't understand, Chaucy objected. Besides, I haven't done anything like it since. But no one sees it that way, and that's my problem. Your problem, Vanderlyn stated, is that when someone tells you not to do something, you hear, find a different way to do it, which I admit is not always a character flaw and will serve you well in your line of work, but is nonetheless problematic when a person tells you not to trespass in private districts or not to test your improved fireworks in the city. Those fireworks worked spectacularly, Chaucy objected. They just did it in a direction I hadn't intended. James Chaucy Thatcher, none of your catastrophic muck-ups are intentional, which is another of your problems. Ah, here we are. Where? Chaucy asked. He looked down at the surrounding treetops with their particularly dense branches, but didn't see anything otherwise exceptional about them. Do you think you've recovered? No dizziness, headaches, good coordination, steady on your legs? Sure. Why? Where are we? Vanderlyn didn't answer, but instead jolted Chaucy off his shoulder and caught the front of his shirt in his claw. I won't be taking you to the inspector today. So you're letting me go? Chaucy said hopefully. In a manner of speaking, Vanderlyn replied. Brace yourself. It was then that Chaucy noticed how close he was to the edge, and that he was moving closer. Oh, no, Vanderlyn, don't! Stop your whining. It's not like you're unaccustomed to this. He let Chaucy go. A cluster of trees, thick with age, whooshed up to swallow him like the walls of a tomb. Stripes of wide metal flashed by in empty air, and then the branches resumed. Their twigs thwacked against his face and cut his skin, but with a twist of determination, he turned himself to face the ground and grabbed at whatever branches his hands could reach. The first several broke under his velocity, but they also lessened it, and when a thick one struck him with a meaty thwap, he snatched hold and clambered on to get his bearings. Just in time to hear the whoosh of his box zoom past. It crashed in the underbrush 50 feet below. Are you alive, boy? He heard Vanderlyn shout from above. Yes, Chaucy spat back. No thanks to you. You're a calderling, Vanderlyn dismissed. You've survived worse. Chaucy had, but he wasn't about to give Vanderlyn the satisfaction of hearing him admit it. When he heard the creak of Vanderlyn walking away, he deflated against the branch. Residual bursts of terrified energy still coursed through his veins. So after making sure his important bones were whole, he made use of them and began his slow way down to the under oaks. Even if he'd wanted to climb back up, he couldn't. The trees closest to the walkway had been shaved of their upper branches and sleeved in wide iron bands, making it impossible for the average climber to reach the heights from the ground underneath. They'd been put there to deter courageous thieves, but enhanced because of him, which was why some were barbed with poisoned spikes. This he'd learned the hard way. So he jumped slid, and wrapped himself around branches until he made it to the mossy undergrowth. He found his box, and it looked undamaged. He'd built it hardy in anticipation of days like this, with a spring-supported inner chamber that would absorb sudden shocks in place of the contents. All the branches the box had broken during its descent had probably helped with the shocks too, and the mostly wooden parts inside would bend first before breaking, so his equipment was probably intact. Unfortunately, it was at the bottom of an old spiked war pit, which complicated things. He cursed the old Oricans for not filling in their war traps, but soon rigged a harness from some thick vines and recovered the box, no worse for the wear. It had crushed most of the rotting wooden spikes anyway. Now, with the box in hand, he crawled out of the underbrush and hopped an iron fence onto a bricked street. Some passers-by gave him odd looks, but continued on in polite silence, and so he tidied himself as best he could and began his trek back to the high districts. And that is the end of Chapter 1.
All right. Wow. Boy, you got that almost right on time to 3 o'clock. We're gonna run over a little bit today. Yes. Oh, that's okay. Okay, so that is perfectly fine. Let me change up what we are looking at here. So get your info back up there. So we do have a couple questions.
Oh, yay!
And
I'll try to be quick so we don't go over.
oh no, it's okay. We don't turn into a pumpkin at 3 o'clock, so
okay,
don't feel. Good. Yeah. Yes, I think Newt wrote all of the questions because Jay said that they were. She said I was trying to ask the same question, and so everything is from Newt and I this afternoon. I hope that's okay. Let's see. Here is question number 1. Do you take inspiration from the people around you to construct realistic characters?
I don't think I ever consciously do. A lot of times it's not so much people around me as usually celebrities or actors or specific people that I imagine in certain roles. For example, there's a character later in the novel that you meet whose name is Agent Cider. And he exists entirely because there was this period where my husband and I were watching a bunch of movies that just happened to feature Ron Perlman, which was how I figured out that Ron Perlman is one of my husband's favorite character actors. And so Cider is pretty much like Ron Perlman, just as the type of characters that he usually plays. And sometimes if I'm having difficulty with a character, I will think about like, who would I cast to play this character? In a movie, even if I don't know anything, even if I'm still defining this character, I'd just be like, what does this character look like? Who does this character look like? And then kind of take cues from that. So it's very rare that I do people that I know immediately. But there is an actual exception with not so much with The Wizard's Way as with Monster Punk Horizon, where the two main characters are basically my husband's and my Monster Hunter World characters. So it's not really quite self-insert fantasy, but there's a lot of me in the character that's based on my character, and then there's a lot of my husband in the other character. And so in that instance, it was intentional, but other than that, not really.
Do you ever, so building on that a little bit, do you guys ever cosplay your characters from your books, like at a con or something like that?
We thought about it, but when it came down to it, like if I'm going to cosplay, I want to do really intensely good cosplay, and I just don't have the time to do it anymore. What with all the writing stuff we're doing, there was one period where I built like a full suit of armor costume. And I really like to get into the details of costuming. And when I was growing up, my mom was actually a seamstress and worked from home whenever she was helping or whenever she was raising my sister and I. And so I've got resources if I have sewing questions. But it's just to do it the way I want to do it. I just don't have time. But it would be a whole lot of fun. The other resource you need, though, is space if you start sewing, because then you buy all the fabrics and all the trims and all the threads and all of the things, and it just goes on. You can't see it because it's buried beneath paper and books, but there's a whole ton of cloth and sewing implements, like, in my office. Yeah, like, it's like the second layer of the mess is sewing stuff.
I guess... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's been, like, at least 3 years since I've sewn anything. It's been a while.
So this one actually also kind of builds a little bit on the original question, which was, if you could choose someone today to portray your main character, who would you choose?
This is perfect because I actually had a discussion about this on Facebook like 2 days ago. And the thing about my stories is that I actually envision them as animated movies, like some weird combination of Disney and anime. And so I rarely actually think of my characters in terms of actors so much as voices. Mm-hmm. And so if I were to go with sort of my own headcanon, I would actually choose Adam Howden to voice Chaucy. And I don't think he's incredibly well known. The main thing that he is known for is doing the voice of Shulk in the Xenoblade Chronicles video game. And he just has this really distinct, regal, just English British voice. And I mean, really a lot of, like, all the characters in that series do, but the character Shulk also looks somewhat like Chaucy. And so he is my headcanon for Chaucy. Now, in terms of actors, I actually had to do some thinking on that. If I were to go in terms of appearance, I think it would actually be Brendan Thwaites. You'd have to like make him a little more weedy, and or Brenton Thwaites, I think is who it is. You'd have to make him a little more weedy and less conventionally hot, but he has that appearance. Like, especially there's like a few pictures where he's like got blonde, messy hair, and that's absolutely Chaucy. But I was also thinking that it's completely like you'd have to de-age him to a teenager, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Richard Ayoade, I think, is how his name is pronounced. And he's Moss in the IT crowd. And in terms of characters, he doesn't look anything like Chaucy in my head, but he is basically like, he's Chaucy's character. Like he wouldn't even have to act. Yeah, he's just the kind of he's a nerd, and he's comfortable being a nerd, but he doesn't want to be around anybody. And he's just he is the actor I would choose if I had complete power to de-age actors and whatnot. And I usually have really specific images of what my characters look like, but honestly, if he was cast as Chaucy in a movie version of The Wizard's Way, I wouldn't even care. Like, because his acting would be so perfect. Yeah.
That's it. Then you would find yourself having to go back and just alter your world a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It would be amazing.
I love that actor too. He's great. Your door is
we're getting a visitor. Yes, I have a cat, and I leave my door slightly. Are you gonna come say hey, or are you gonna just be snooty? Let me see if I can bring her up here. Oh, don't scream.
It's because closed doors are.
This is Nova, and normally
kitty.
Yeah. She's all sweet, and she's looking really annoyed right now. Normally she's a sweetheart, but it's like whenever she knows I'm in front of a camera, she just decides to be the least social thing in the world. But she's so social that one time we had a plumber come in to do work, and she just sat on him while he was trying to fix one of our pipes. And so I think she's leaving now. Yep. I guess she just had to come say hey.
So this is one of my questions. Let me find it. Let's one of my tongue-in-cheek questions. What is fashionably bloody? if being bloody in that part of town is unfashionable, what is fashionably bloody?
that part of town wouldn't really have a standard for fashionably bloody. They're all very snooty, clean people. And actually, now that I think of it, the area that Chaucy is from might actually have a fashionably bloody standard, because he's from it was mentioned in passing in the chapter, but the area of the Iron City that he hails from is called the Cauldron, which is this place where they put all the industry, and it's also where they throw criminals and people they otherwise don't really have any use for. And then it's like they have jails, but it's like if you're really bad, they just throw you in the Cauldron and you go die or something. But so he was born. Yeah, it's like they don't give them any like limited resources and whatnot, and it's just a really, really awful, tragic place to be. And naturally, people there like reproduce and have children. So there are people there who haven't even, you know, committed crimes or anything. I guess it's like a really, really narrow Australia, I guess, but in terms of its initial function. There's an entire culture that has grown up around there. And there's one of the things that I don't think he says it in this book, but Chaucer, or another character in a later book, says that violence is the currency of the cauldron. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very rough setting where there's sort of, the rougher you are, the more power you have. And right. So it's like the bloodier you are, the less people want to mess with you, or the more people want to be in your gang. Yeah. So the cauldron would have fashionable blood.
Fashionable. So, okay, I want to say first, before I take the last question here, I want to say first, everybody, now is the time. Put your name into the comments section at this time if you want to be entered to win a copy of this book. And today we have a physical copy of The Wizard's Way and also an e-copy, so that you can get your, signed by the author, right? And then also an e-copy in case you just can't wait to get started on it. So now is the time. Put your name into the comments. Do that thing. And then I will be adding you to the Wheel of Win. And let me find our last question and bring it up here. Actually, I have a couple, but I will start with one and see how it goes. Let's see. So is your story based on a real location, or is it just inspired by real locations?
It's completely fictional, but there are elements that I drew from places that I like. For example, the fact that the Iron City is basically sprawled up a mountain. At the time, I really liked lurking around Asheville, North Carolina, and just being in that sort of mountainous terrain and riding there and checking it out. And so it's the Iron City is not necessarily directly inspired by Asheville, but it's sort of inspired by the unique mountain geography, because I really enjoy, I'm from a sort of foothill area, so we have interesting terrain, but it's not interesting mountain terrain. And I like when I go to mountains, when I'm driving through mountains, and suddenly you'll see this big, enormous mountain, and then this random house just sitting on the side. Like, who's going to put a house there? And so it's and also, of course, like Victorian Britain, not a specific place in Victorian Britain, but it's steampunk. So
fair enough. Okay. Yep. Well, I'm going to pull up the wheel here, the Wheel of Win, and then we will add the names from the comments to the Wheel of Win. And let me just get that here. There are 3 possible entries, you guys, that you can get onto the Wheel of Win, which means you would be entered into every single drawing that we do here, whether or not you happen to make it for the live show. But you can subscribe to the YouTube channel for an entry. You can subscribe to the Patreon for a second entry. And then, of course, either putting your name into the comments, or if it's the Wednesday show, putting the magic word into the comments, and that will get you a 3rd possible entry for a maximum of 3 possible per person. And if you are subscribed to either of the channels, either or, then that means you will automatically be entered no matter what. So,
nice. Oh, yes. I saw that we have a little question from Wesley. It's, "You're late to the party. What's the book title?" It is The Wizard's Way. So, yes, in case you missed it earlier. So, yes.
The Wizard's Way, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and I see you out there also, Sharon. Okay, thank you so much. Let me just get this whole screen up here. And there we go. And so, and I think that was everybody from the comments section. Let me just go back and make sure. Is okay. Yes. Okay. That is everybody. And I'm going to give this just its extra bit of randomness. I like to make sure it definitely gets randomized. Here we go. And I think that is everything. Perfect. Submit. And here is our wheel for a copy of The Wizard's Way by H.P. Holo. Viola, congratulations. You are the winner of today's book. Yes, you know, I want to actually say, because I know that this is a strange thing. I'm going to actually spin one more time because I know that in the past, Viola has not always claimed their prize. So I want to have a runner-up for today just in case. So I'm going to give it an extra spin. So we'll take Viola off the list and give it another go just in case. But we will reach out Lee Tro. I don't know how you would say that. I say Tro in my head, but I think it's supposed to be Troth. All right, you are our runner-up for today. So I will, yes, congratulations to you guys. And I before we take off then here today, is there anything that you would like to say to everybody?
Thank you for listening. And if you read the book, I hope you enjoy it.
Yes, and also leave those comments as well, because the comments are very important to the indie authors. Oh, goodness, yes. I have cameras going on everywhere, don't I? Like, okay. Yeah, and with that said, it is Friday, you guys. I will see you back here tomorrow, Saturday. We are having a live in-person hedge game. We are going to go to the Sculpture Forest Park on Whidbey Island for our live hedge game, and then we will at 7 o'clock, of course, be back in the hedge on Discord for our virtual hedge game like normal. So you guys can, if you're not near us, you still will have a game tomorrow. And if you are near us, then come with us up to Sculpture Forest and let's do something in person. And then also Sunday is Handmade Home Shopping. So super packed, busy weekend. Handmade Home Shopping, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And please hit the like and subscribe, you guys. And we will see you, well, tomorrow and or Sunday, I guess, with the official days. So have a good weekend, everybody. Yes.
Hello, friends. This is Gunther Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Use your troll hammer to ring that little bell icon to get notifications when she posts future videos. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the Fairy family. Safe travels.